Well, first of all, Holly,
Yes.
who's that guy on your left now?
Lyman, my brother-in-law. He's the youngest of the nurses.
And you married his brother, I
Yes,
understand.
David.
David Nourse?
Yes.
What was your maiden name?
Hollinger. Hallanger. Hollinger. So I got the nickname Holly from that.
Oh, you did? What's your given name?
Ruth Anna.
Which you never used.
Well, I had a sister-in-law who lived across the road, and her name was Ruth Anna Nourse, and that was two of us. And there were two Harvey nurses, there were two Lorries, two Davids. So
So you ended up Holly.
I ended up Holly.
And when did your folks come up in this country and why?
My parents?
Mm-hmm.
No, I didn't come up here until I came in 38,
Oh.
and then after World War II I married David. But my mother was born in Norway, and I grew up in North Dakota.
You did? Where in North Dakota?
Well, I was born in Little Falls, and Charles Lindbergh and I were the same age, and we used to see him with a wagon pulled by a goat, because when he was a little boy, he was interested in transportation. So I knew one famous person, and my claim to fame is that I was born in the same town where Charles Lindbergh was born. Yeah.
And Lyman, your folks came up here when?
My dad was born in Bayfield, and we have always heard that he was the first white boy born in Bayfield, and that would have been about 1854 or something like that. It's on the cemetery lot up there, but I forget those dates. Yeah. 1856 or something.
So your grandfather came here then?
Yes,
First.
he came from the east because of poor health. And when he arrived in Bayfield, the climate was just what he needed, and he lived to be quite old. And again, I forget the date that he died. My memory is cool. So.
That's amazing that he came at that time for health, because there wasn't anything here.
There were 3 houses, I believe, in Bayfield when he first settled here. And he had a mercantile store. So, and my dad used to work in that, and they traded a great deal with the Indians in that store.
Where was the store?
It was somewhere where, in the relation where Betty's Beauty Shop used to be, in that area, I believe.
And didn't he learn to talk Chippewa too?
He did talk Chippewa. He would converse with the Indians as they came in, because many of those could not speak English. And they valued the Indian trade.
What was his name?
Joseph Nourse.
And your grandfather?
No, my father's name was Harvey.
Oh.
My grandfather's name was Joseph then.
I see.
And there's a baby named Joseph Nourse now.
Yeah. So my roots are deep in Bayfield, although I was born out at Selmo, where what is now Pinehurst. My father bought that property when Captain Pike died. His wife could not cope with the big house and so forth, so she put it up for sale. And my father was in the land office business at that time, so it never got any further. He glommed onto the property, and of course,
1907.
it's been it was family home until Holly sold it here about 3 years ago.
And why was it called Pinehurst?
When during the about 1922, when the Indian pageant was set up out here at Schooner Bay, my dad thought that there'd be a going concern, and we put up 15 cabins, little lighthouse keeping cabins along the beach, and up 3 of them were below the hill where the house stands, down along the creek. And we rented those to tourists, and they named the place Pinehurst. I suppose because of the 2 big pines that are alongside the house up there, and another big one behind it.
You still got some of those brochures, haven't you? Or somebody does.
There's somewhere.
I think Keith has them yet.
Yeah, because somewhere along the line I saw the advertisement that somebody mailed out. There's a wonderful picture.
Yeah.
I
And the
think Keith
railroad
has them.
stopped and
Oh, yes. Well, of course, Salmo had a little depot there, and the train would stop there. My dad, on a cold Sunday morning, he'd run down and catch the train to go to church, and then after church service, there were 7 round trips into Bayfield when I was a kid
wow.
with that scoot. It was shuttling back and forth. I don't think it ever made any money.
Felt like Bart.
And that area down there was called Salmo.
That's Salmo.
How did it get that name?
Well, Captain Pike gave the land to the state for the fish hatchery. And I think Salmo is
Fish in
Latin name for trout.
Trout.
So I believe through that area it was named. And a little sidelight, when he gave them the land and they built the hatchery, they preserved the lower end of Pikes Creek as a private trout stream for him. And then when my dad bought it, we always condemned my dad because he didn't insist on
Oh.
that those rights being conveyed to the new owner. But that was a good trout stream. I think it still is. Yeah.
It belongs
From-
to the property, yeah, the deed is
Yeah.
in Madison.
From my bedroom in the northwest corner of the house, I could look down into a pool of the creek and there were trout coming up, surfacing. What a way to grow up.
Well, Mickey, what about your folks? Where were they from, or your family?
My father's name was Ernest Nordin. He came here from Minneapolis as an infant. And he had a plumbing and tinsmithing shop. And he did much of the plumbing in Bayfield for many years.
Including in some strange places.
Right, right. And my mother was born in Bayfield. And she, of course, would be, she'd be over 100 now. And we lived out along the lake shore, about a mile out of town. And that too was a great place to grow up because
Beautiful.
between running in the lake in the summer and trying to catch the neighbors with their hay, I was awfully busy. And then of course we had to pick berries. But then in later years, in the 30s, my father and Dale Voris built a box factory, and they made berry boxes. And they would get the lumber or the logs and have them peeled. The whole operation. It was down in the vicinity of where the trailer park is, across from the
Next to Wrighton's there?
right. Yeah, and part of the East Dock.
No, it was over at Erickson's trailer court down there.
Yeah, that's-
What used to be
Oh.
Grunke's lot across from the marina.
Oh, okay.
And they made the whole thing from buying the logs to the finished boxes. And so I worked in that for a while, but then that burned. And I don't know. I don't know how they survived in those days because there wasn't any money, but still people did it.
Everybody worked too.
Still
Yeah.
have
I don't know if
gardens.
there's anybody that didn't pick berries here in this
Oh
town.
no, that was just...
Or choke herring.
Yeah, that's right. I never could figure out, my dad was a real good tinsmith. In those days, you didn't buy any of the saddles and things for chimneys ready-made. Or boat tanks, and of course, all the fish boats were made locally. And my dad, without having more than an 8th grade education, could somehow figure out the angles and the baffles and all of that and build a gas tank, X number of gallons for a certain shaped boat, or do all these other metal things to fit roofs and whatnot. I've often wondered how he did it.
Yeah. Smart.
And how'd you meet Lyman?
Well, I guess by osmosis in the church and so on.
So you grew up together?
Not really. We didn't know each other existed, I guess, until after I was through high school, and so.
We used to pick her up to, she'd be walking to church or something on Sunday, you know, and we'd stop and pick her up. How little I thought that someday, you know.
Yeah, how long's that someday been?
46 years, 47 years, June, this last June. Yep.
And when we were married, we had the first church wedding. We had a nice church wedding here. And one of the ladies said, well, you know, some of these church marriages don't last. So,
Some of them don't, huh?
maybe it won't.
We won't go into any more of the details of that one.
And what did you do to make a living, Lyman?
Oh, golly, that's a long story. You know, I was education advisor in the CCC camps. That's a little interesting story, too, because I had a 30-foot boat that I used to take people out. And I was the first one to put a boat in service for taking parties trolling and making a business of it. Commercial fishermen would always take them out, you know, early when they were in, the trout were in shallow water. But I made a business of it and throughout the summer. And one of the parties that I took out for just a boat trip was General Mark Clark.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
He was a relative of the Fultons that used to live down at Selmo. So we were coming back in from this trip, and he came up in front, the wheel was up in front, and he said, Lyman, what are you going to be doing? I says, I really don't know. I graduated from Northland. I didn't want to teach. I just didn't want to teach. And I told him, and he says, you know, he said something about the CCC camps. He says, as an educational advisor, he says, that might be interesting. And I said, yeah. He says, would you be interested? And I says, I think I would. Nothing more was said. But in August, I got a call from the headquarters in Sparta. Is this Lyman Nourse? Yes. Did you make application for education advisor? No. Would you be interested? Yes. By the way, do you know General Mark Clark? Yes. Get your business down here. So I had the job. And I stayed in that for a couple of years, and I came back and went back into trolling. And in 1940, I had the chance to build a 38-foot twin-screw cruiser.
Was that the Black Hawk?
No, that was the Disturbance.
The Disturbance.
And we cut the keel up in our own timber. David was an artist with a broadaxe. He broadaxed two sides, and then we whipsawed, you know,
Wow.
two sides. And that was the most beautiful piece of timber, 45 foot, without a wrinkle, without a blemish. And we hired Avon Christensen to lay it up, and I helped him. And I installed the motors. They were Studebaker President automobile engines. I sent the transmissions out east, and they were converted to 100% reverse, 100% forward. I was told that it wouldn't work. Billy Miller told me it wouldn't work because you got to have alternate rotation, you know, opposite rotation. I used Chrysler brake boosters to throw the clutches, little vacuum valves off of a toilet tank to regulate the vacuum for throwing the clutch. That was on top of the steering of the shifting lever, and you couldn't find a better hydraulic system that never failed. If the engine was running, you had positive control.
Wow.
And it was a beautiful boat. I've got pictures of all of it: the construction, the launching, that was perhaps the outside of marrying. That was perhaps the biggest thrill of my life to be able to
I'm
do
glad
that.
you got in there making it.
Yes. That was nice.
I see the kids didn't make it.
Then trolling went because of the trout, you know, the lamprey. And I sold that boat to the Severson brothers in Duluth, and they used it for years on their Isle Royal run and pickup. And I bought another one. I bought one with a 450 horse Liberty airplane engine in it. That was the Black Hawk. And I ran it for 2 years and put in marine engines there. But I had a chance to go to work for Berger as superintendent of Allwood down here. And the kids were getting up to where they were going into high school, and Bayfield was kind of the end of the line for educational opportunities. So we thought maybe if we're going to make a move, be the time. So we heard that the taconite industry, it was just starting. We didn't know anything about it, but we took a week off and went up, and I wound up going to work for Erie Mining Company up at White Lakes, Minnesota. And I was there for 18 years and retired from there. So then we came back to Bayfield. So that is a capsule of what I did. I had that wasn't a good 18 years, after I got my feet on the ground. But Erie Mining was very good to me. The last 10 years I was industrial hygienist for them. And it was a dream job. They would spend any amount of money that had anything to do with safety. And of course that was fun. So we came back to Bayfield, and retirement has been pretty good.
You're not bored.
Tell much about when you retired.
When I retired, I vowed that I would not do a day's work for pay. I haven't. I'll help anybody, do anything they want, but I won't take pay for it, because I figured that would destroy the concept of retirement. You're not your own boss then. So
That doesn't count those golf games that you have to shell out something.
that isn't.
It's getting a little shaky there.
Might have to revise his plan.
No, I think we can survive that.
Oh.
We prepared for retirement pretty well, and Erie Mining Company was awfully good to me, so it's been a wonderful retirement.
And how many years have you been retired?
13. We came back and we remodeled our house completely, and it's a nice retirement.
Well, let's get back to you, Holly. Tell us what made you come up here?
Well, I was teaching. I taught English, Latin, and music. When you got in a small town, you taught about everything. And I taught in Minnesota. I never stayed more than 4 years in a school, because when I got them as freshmen and graduated them as seniors, I was ready to start with a different batch of kids. And then I went up to North Dakota, where I taught in Maddock, a little town where they had a really nice vocational high school. And a lot of music in the city, and we were a 70-voice choir singing the Messiah every year. We had a good director who was hired by the local high school up there. And then it was during the Depression, because I graduated in 30, which meant that I got a salary of $130 a month, which was wonderful, I thought. But it went down all the time for 8 years. And then towards the end, I have to get this lick in for the feminists. The men were getting all the raises. And the last year I was up in Maddock, I needed a raise because I was helping my youngest brother and sister finish college. My father died at that time. And I asked the board if I could have a raise, and they said, well, we're sorry, but there's just so much raise money, and they were giving it to a young man who had 1 year of experience, but he was getting married, so he got all the raise money, and I said, I gotta go. So I got a job in Bayfield, and I came up here to sign my contract, and I was hired in Minneapolis, where I met the superintendent. And I came up here, and I thought, well, this is all business, and I took the train to Ashland, and there was a bus that met the train and came over to Bayfield, and he knew who I was and where I was supposed to be. The bus driver did. And then I was met by Joe O'Malley. He was called Mr. Bayfield for many years. He was a clerk of the school board. And so I said, well, are we going over to your office to sign my contract? Oh, no, he said, I want you to like Bayfield. I'm going to show you Bayfield. Took me out to the old fire tower There was the old wooden one, it swayed a lot. And we went to the top and he said, now, where can you get a better view? Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. And I was pretty impressed by that. And then he took me for a tour of the waterfront and showed me all the fishing boats. And I was amazed because I thought I should impress them with the fact that I could sign my contract because I was qualified. But he was trying to sell me Bayfield, and I tell you, it didn't take long. Because when I went back to Minneapolis, my mother asked me, do you like Bayfield? And I said, well, I plan to spend the rest of my life there. And I just about did that.
Okay, we need to change the tape, so we'll take a little break.
Being retired, we don't have a schedule.
That's good. I'm not unstructured.
Don't have any appointments to get to.
Not for a while.
I like the idea of having an unstructured day. You know, mostly it is that. And, it's pretty
Well, Holly, when did you meet Lyman's brother?
Well, when I came to teach in '38.
You meet him that first year?
Oh, yes. We sang in the choir, and everybody sang in the choir. And we sang in the choir, and I met him then, and, well, we had some dates. I used to go hunting with him, and we walked on the ice, Lyman, one time, and shot at the icicles, and I like to shoot at targets with a rifle, so we shot the icicles, which showed up against the red cliffs. We did that sometimes. And then the war came, and David went into the Navy to avoid being in the Army. And he was in the Navy 3 years. And after the war was over, we were married. And so, that was. And David, people used to ask me, what does David do? Well, what he did was a lot of things. He was a commercial fisherman for 20 years. And he fished herring with his brother Harvey. And on the fishing end of the business, Harvey was called the Admiral of the Fleet. And up at the sugar bush where we made maple syrup, David called himself the Chief Sap. And they worked together very well for many years.
How many nurse kids were there in your generation, Lyman?
We had 3 brothers and 1 sister. And my sister Gladys died in 1967. She was living at Ashland at the time. And then Lori, don't ask me what the years that they died with, but I'm the last one.
He died in 80. Lori died in 80, and Harvey died in 81, and David died in 82.
82, okay.
Did Joe, now your grandfather's Joseph,
Yes.
and how many kids did he have?
Ooh. There were 3 brothers, Harvey, Lori, and Edward was the oldest. Edward was the oldest one. And about 4 sisters. I think they perhaps were 7s.
And they all basically stayed around here?
No, Lori did. But and Aunt Bessie did. She was a spinster and she was an artist. And she was a good artist too. But the others, one went out to California and the others were out east. And they were so much older than we were that I never knew the older sisters. But we knew Aunt Louise and Aunt Bessie and the 3 brothers.
Now, which part of the family was the logging camp stuff?
You know, that came out in the Riding the Wind.
As the nurse camp?
And the nurse camp, and I cannot remember a nurse logging camp.
They didn't have one.
So I think that my dad was never a logger himself. When we had the sugar bush, we cut some there was timber cut for the dock during the Depression and the WPA days out of our timber. But that's about the extent of it. And then Harvey and David cut some pulp, I think, up there in the bush at one time.
Did somebody plant the sugar bush?
No, that's
That was
original.
just
That is a virgin timber.
The Indians used to make maple syrup up there. And I saw, in my early years up here, the ring of stones in the place where they had the fire with a big kettle under it. And then David cut down a tree that had died, and he found in it the V-shaped tap. They'd make two sharp slashes in there, and then hang a birch bark pail, which they made waterproof with pitch on there. And that the Indians made syrup up there for many years.
When we first started that sugar bush, there were many of the older trees had the original Indian taps on them. We started that sugar bush in 1927.
And Pike didn't ever use it?
No, you see that, my
Or
dad...
that wasn't part of his
No,
property?
that property was picked up on delinquent taxes. My dad happened to be cruising. He used to sell a lot of land. And I don't know just how he happened to walk through that. But of course, when he walked through that virgin timber, there was that little spark, and he picked it up on tax title, and that's been in the family since. 1927.
Oh, it's a wonderful
It was
place.
primitive when we started,
Still
but
beautiful up there.
Oh,
when David was such a artist with a broadaxe that building a cabin was just a natural thing for him, and he's mitered and scarfed the logs out, so they fit.
Who taught him how to do that?
I think it's just self-taught. For one winter during the Depression, he and another neighbor went out back of Sioux River and cut railroad ties for a living. And that was a losing job because it was all hard work, and when you come to sell them in the spring, the inspector that inspected the ties, he threw out ties that they thought were good, It wasn't a paying proposition at all. Hard work,
A lot of work.
but David became very proficient with the broadaxe. And if you don't believe that takes experience, you try it.
yeah.
Hewing,
Yeah.
making a nice
Yeah.
square,
A smooth cut,
perfect one with an axe. It's called hewing, and there aren't very many people that know how to do that anymore.
Particularly now. Yeah.
And when Becky and I were married, we figured that sugar bush and the place down at Salmo can't support another family. So we just decided not to divorce the family, but make our own living
Take off.
aside from it.
So you came into town then?
Yeah, that's right.
He also said, I never want to try to make a living off of northeast wind and scenery.
That takes a little explanation. When we were growing up, very young, my dad was Strawberry King of Wisconsin. He had 13 acres of strawberries. Now that's not much at this time, but back in the before 1920, in the 1915, 1920, that was a lot of acreage, and they did not have irrigation. And as I remember it, we never had a good crop where you could make anything. Either there were drought, there'd be a frost, or if there was a good crop, there'd be no market for them. You'd be competing with other good crops for price, or the price of crates would go up, or couldn't get pickers. Oh gosh, it was one thing, and so I made a vow myself then that I would not make a living where nature was dictating the terms. So,
That's right. And then during those years of strawberry growing, they shipped a carload of strawberries a day to Minneapolis for a while.
oh yes.
And they had to hire girls from Ashland were the ones who would come over and pick. And they had to stay overnight, so they built a dormitory for them. Wasn't that what the annex was?
That was the girls that came down from Superior.
Oh.
That was in the heyday of it.
100 pickers.
And later on, we would have girls that come over from Ashland and stay in one or two of the cottages. We had lesser acreage then. But it was no doubt, what do I want to say? Those girls were a problem. And, we could try to make sure the boys didn't come down too often, but they'd go out and meet the boys. It was a two-way street.
I love it.
But you know, we got by, and some of those girls are still over in Ashland, and I'll see them once in a while, and we'll relive a few of those experiences.
Well, you mean you helped invite them out the window?
No, I would like to have, but you know, as kind of field boss and so forth, I didn't dare. Yeah.
Well, now,
But the opportunity, what an opportunity.
where was that field of berries, or was it
You
more
know,
than one?
Up on top of Salmo Hill, where there's a Benton lives there now, and where the fruit market. Now that parcel was
That orchard.
Alcott's?
no Moline, not
Yeah, Moline.
Moline's property, and ours was to the north of it, and we had, I think it was 30 acres there, and most of our berry patches were up there. We later sold that property to Russell Aiken, and I don't know who bought it from Russell Aiken.
But you said one year, you could, we had hot weather,
Yeah.
and you could just smell those berries cooking
Yeah.
through the whole valley.
Yeah.
And that's where they built that big annex. It would have been about a 50-foot by 30-foot building, dormitory, with cooking facilities on one end. My mother used to do the cooking for them.
Wow.
And they'd have these girls would come down from Superior and stay during the season. But I was too young to remember much of that, just very vaguely. I was awfully young. But there are good pictures of the strawberry fields down at Salmo with the house in the background. And that was yeah.
Some of the fields, were down on the bottom.
Oh yeah.
Oh, sure, I remember those pictures.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
But our childhood was a good one. A lot of wonderful memories.
A stream full of fish, right?
Yeah.
We
worked hard.
House.
We worked hard, but there was always time for interesting things, you know.
Well, you built that little railroad.
Yeah, little model railroad that went along the edge of the ravine there above the creek,
Oh, wow.
and I suppose there was 400 feet of track.
Keith has some of those.
we made our own cars and engines
You
and
did?
all that, and
That you could ride in.
oh no,
No,
it
small.
was a 5-inch scale. So it was just a small, something that David and I primarily did just for fun. That was a lot of fun. Our imaginations would run wild.
Well, that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah. That's what makes it interesting.
Yeah. So yeah.
Well, Holly, did you teach all those years here in Bayfield?
No,
Until you were there,
I
or-
taught 38 to 42, and then after I married David and we had 3 children, I started to teach again when my youngest son was in 1st grade. And I taught 12 years again then, until I taught in Bayfield and then in Washburn and then in Ashland. I retired in 70, so I've been retired for 18 years, and I like retirement.
The unstructured day.
That's right.
When did you start your weaving?
Well, that was after I got my eye disease, this macular degeneration, and when I couldn't see very well, the rehabilitation program in Wisconsin is very good. They looked me up and asked me what I wanted to do, and I said I've always wanted to weave. My grandmother used to weave. My father was born in Iowa, and I went down to see her and went to Chautauqua. Those were wonderful summers too, and watched my grandmother weave. And I got the idea from then, and never found my grandmother's loom though. But I have a big loom and a small loom, and I enjoy doing that. So I taught 28 years in all.
Wow.
And
Where were you guys when the flood came through?
Oh, that's quite a story.
that is a story. Lyman has
Yeah.
a good
We
part.
were living up across from the school in the Wasmuth house.
Okay.
And I had taken the party out trolling, and I was bone tired. And at that time we kept our boat down in a slip. We had pumped out a slip, a basin, boat basin in the field below, down there below the house. And it started to
Below
rain.
what house? I mean,
But
Pinehurst.
below
Pinehurst,
Harvey's,
okay.
below
Below
Harvey's
Harvey's.
house, the birches. We had a boat basin there.
wow.
Yeah, and this 38-foot boat loomed up pretty good out there. But anyway, it started to rain, and I was dead tired. And I heard the fire whistle blow, and we answered, said, "Where's the fire?" And said, "We need people down there." And I thought, "Oh, I can't. I was just bone tired." And finally, we got up, and it was just kept raining, and we went downtown and saw the devastation. Holy mackerel! There was nothing you could do. But in the morning, we thought we'd go out and see what the conditions were at Salmo, because telephone lines were down, everything was down. And we went up the cemetery, and I think we perhaps were the first one that went up that road, up the cemetery road. And here was the cemetery washed out, and there were some coffins sticking in the bank. And but that was blocked off, so we couldn't get out there. So we went back downtown, and I looked up Bill Moon and rented a little rowboat from him with a 3-horse outboard. And it was so slow that I rowed to help. We finally got to Selmo. As we came around the corner, we saw a couple of the bivvies from the cabins floating out in the bay. And it was just, it was just a lake. The road was washed out, of course, and people from the cabins were brought up to the house, and people there were some others, I guess, that had stopped in cars. My mother fed 40 people for, 3 meals? Or 4 meals?
That, about 5 meals.
5 meals.
And David said
And
he took some of the people out of windows in some of the cabins.
That was out without her ever getting to a grocery store.
So she was pretty well stocked out there. But we had taken some pictures of the flood and the devastation in the morning. And when we got out to Salmo, John Chappell was there. And he wanted to know what it was like. And I explained a little bit of it. I didn't want to belabor it too much because you hate to make notoriety on other people's disasters. And he saw my camera and he said, "Did you take pictures?" And I said, "Yes." Well, he wanted to know if he could have I think I had 2 rolls. And I said, "Well, on one condition, that you don't tell where they came from or anything, because I don't want any notoriety." And you can guess what the results were.
Oh, sure.
Headlines in big type. Exclusive flood photos by Lyman Nourse. I could have killed the guy.
Famous in spite of yourself.
And I don't think I've ever really forgiven him.
Well, he was a bit of a weirdo. I mean, still
He has
is.
changed in the last few years,
Yeah,
of
he isn't
course.
quite as wild as he was in the old days.
But, gosh.
But now that triggered a thought in my mind. How did the Turner come to be pulled up out there in the bay?
That wasn't the Turner.
Oh, okay.
That was the old
The
Charlotte.
Charlotte.
Oh, okay.
It was a boat that was no longer good. And Harvey and David thought that they could use parts of it and so forth, so they pulled it up in shallow water, and it just went to pieces.
That's been my touchstone for the lake level ever since I'm about 6 years old.
Yeah.
Come around the corner and see what it is.
Yeah.
Our children loved the Charlotte because when they got to be up in their teens, they used to go out there and use the deck of the Charlotte for sunbathing and
sure.
gathering with their friends, and it was sticking up out there. And
So now where
They
was your
enjoyed
boat hole?
it.
Was sort of in front of where that's pulled
Yes. There's nothing left. Well, there's a little bit of a pool of dead water in the field yet, but most of it's washed back
up?
in.
And the boat was all right in the flood?
Yeah. Everything was fine.
When you talked about going up the hill to get out to Selmo, when was the road put in? The one that we use today wasn't always there, or was it? and that's sort of in that same place. I mean, for a while it went out like where Jay is now.
Yeah.
When did they come through with the regular road?
At that time, I don't think the road over the hill and down by the Sunset Orchard, I don't think that stretch was in, at least we,
Was it open about up as far as Libby's farm, or?
something like that, yeah.
That would be where.
But we were going to go around, try to get out, going around, and how were we going to get back? Well, it had to be that way, Mickey.
It must have been open.
It must have been. Mary, that must have been that time. Mhm.
That's good.
Tape change, another break. Okay. Okay.
Now you gotta wait till my mouth's empty. When we were kids, you know, my dad always had a big truck farm, and we cut wood, everything, anything to make $1, to keep the place from going back to the bank. And in the wintertime, we would haul stuff into Bayfield on the ice, because that hill at Selma,
Oh, yeah.
that was a lot steeper in the olden days, you know, those, but, and it was tough for a team with a load. So I remember one time coming in with the team with a load, and I don't know if it was vegetables or wood or what, but the horses went through, both horses went through. There always was a pressure ridge off the sanitarium point there. And
Is that the famous one the house went down in?
oh no, that was later, but this was when I was a young kid, and I remember that how we struggled. We got the horses out.
Wow.
Now that's deep water off the point there. I know that we had to unhook them from the sled, and by pulling on the bridle reins, you know, so we got those horses out, and that's all I remember of it. But it was an awful hair-raising experience at the time,
Right.
and I think that wound up any hauling by horse in the wintertime, because you know, that pressure ridge was always there, and it was always treacherous.
I meant, was that the same pressure ridge, not the same time? Is that about
Oh
the same?
no.
The other one's out further.
When the house went through, they figured that it hit an old net hole that had frozen over, but the ice wasn't of the same thickness. And they were traveling slow enough so that when the wheel hit it, instead of carrying over, it dropped in and lodged and just locked, and that was over closer to the island.
You can tell them about Harvey and that.
Yeah, see, they had prepared for this, hauling this house across on the ice. The people that had owned the house had put extra furniture and things in there, refrigerators and so forth. There's an easy way of getting them across. Harvey had a plow on an old pickup, and he kept the road cleared of snow for at least a couple of weeks prior to this, so that it would freeze down uniformly. And he rode over with them. Now, the day they did it, I was fishing off a Pice Creek out there, shallow water, and I was waiting for them to pull it off of the shore and start across, and I was going to run out and get pictures. Well, I heard a little noise from inside my teepee, and heck, they were on the ice going like crazy. So I buttoned up everything and came to town, and I was going to, then I took a look, and the truck didn't look right, and the house didn't look right. I ran in and got the binoculars, and the truck was gone. And the house was candid. So I took the snowmobile off of the truck and tied up my dog and ran down. I could go down on the railroad track, see, and hit the ice, and I went out, and it was an awful eerie sight. There was a hole where the truck had gone down, and there were some people standing around. I said, did anybody get hurt? No. Now Harvey had been riding with this truck driver, and when the wheel dropped through and the load stopped, the back wheels of the truck, which carried all the weight, they were sinking, and the truck was starting to list, you know. But Harvey had forgotten his thermos jug
And his gloves.
in the pickup, or I mean in the cab of the truck. So he went back in and got that. That
Hey, God!
so
Yes. And his
he
gloves.
was. He thought there's nothing to that, you know. The truck
it
wasn't
was
through yet. It wasn't way down.
And then they had that picture in the newspaper
Yeah.
of the photographer going down to the,
Yeah, that was.
diving down to the bottom where the house was sitting, and there was the fireplace. And they took a picture of this reporter sitting in front of the fireplace, which was underwater, and warming his hands in front of it. I remember that picture in the Ashland Press, and that story made the New York Times.
Yeah,
It was a smart idea if it had worked.
Yeah,
but that was only a few years ago.
yes, that's not.
Yeah, that isn't ancient history.
Well, Mickey, back to you a second here. After you guys were married, what kind of work did you do, or did you?
Well, I, by choice, an agreement with both of us, between both of us, I stayed home. We had 2 children, and I kept house. Was not what you would call gainfully employed.
Well, it depends on
Well,
what
you
goes
weren't
with
paid
it.
for it, but you were working.
Yes, that's right.
I
And
never wanted
We
to reverse that either.
we had two wonderful children and their families, and we have never regretted it. And this way you get to do all the freebies. As Holly said, you never know what the day is going to bring. Lyman will ask me in the morning, what do you have planned today? And I'll say, somebody will have it planned for me by 10 o'clock this morning.
That happens.
So I keep very busy.
When you guys were getting to know each other and going out on dates and stuff like that, what'd you do?
Well, you would go down to Washburn to the goodie shop and have a either yeah, there's
A
a
chocolate
Google,
malted milk
something like that,
for
you know.
25 cents.
And because money was pretty scarce, pretty scarce. Yeah.
Well, actually, I think where we started going together was in the summertime. There would be he had a boat, and there would be picnics on the beach and that sort of thing. And
Yeah, now, what was that boat's name? Is that the one we were talking about a minute ago?
The first one was.
Oh yeah, we got to get this boat naming
Yeah.
stuff here, Lyman.
Well,
Well-
why in the world?
After I graduated from Northland, and I didn't want to teach, and I thought, well, maybe try trolling, because they would troll in the spring, but as soon as the fish went in deep water, and we thought, well, use this copper aerial cable and go down, deeper. And we built homemade reels and homemade rods and so forth. I remember taking representative from South Bend Bait Company out fishing and experimenting with new types of baits and so forth. Joe Malley went along on that. He was quite an entrepreneur for Bayfield. Gosh. Anyway, I bought this boat it was an open boat over on the island, and we brought it over and we put a cabin on it, and there was always a confusion on what would we name it. We couldn't really decide. So one day I said, there's been so much commotion on arriving at a name that's what I'm going to call it, commotion. Well then, the next one just kind of naturally follows. It'd be Disturbance.
Well, certainly.
And David, when he bought his cruiser up in Duluth the same day I bought the Blackhawk, he named it the Rumpus. So that's the history of it. But there was a lot of good memories from those.
then you built the boathouse.
Yeah, that boathouse that's down at the end of the slip, I built that in 1946 when I bought the Disturbance.
Oh, so the Disturbance and the Admiral were pals for years.
Not Disturbance, the Blackhawk.
Oh, the Blackhawk, yeah.
Yeah, we had to dredge out the end of that slip because it had all been filled in way out there
The flood.
almost to the end of that boathouse. And I got enough logs dredged out in order for all of the timbers, the uprights and cross beams and so forth of that boathouse. It was amazing the condition of the logs that came out from the underneath the sand were perfectly sound. And in fact, when they were loosened, they'd bob to the surface. They weren't even waterlogged to a point where they would remain, except the oak. There were some oak logs that they were waterlogged, but the pine and the hemlock would float, which is an amazing thing. Underwater all those many years, and in the sand. So
Wow.
Tell how much you charged for when you first started trolling and
Oh,
how the
golly,
prices
yes.
have changed.
it was $12 a day for as long as we wanted to go. And think of what it is today.
What is it today?
About 250. I'm not sure. It might be higher than that.
And he
It might be
provided,
higher than that.
and he provided ice and cleaned the fish and
Well,
he
there was
had the
no limit
baits.
to
They
the
didn't have
days.
to bring any bait or line. That was all provided on the
And then you
boats.
went way out to Brownstone. How many
Yeah.
miles was that?
That's 20 some miles. So
See, when did you start the Rocky Island restaurant? How'd that
that
all take
Laurie
place?
and Grace did that.
Okay, now how'd that all come about?
He leased a piece of land out.
Well, Laurie and Fred Harries envisioned a landing strip on the end of that island,
On Rocky?
on Rocky. And Laurie thought, well, a little restaurant, a few cabins, and there'd always be people coming and going, and they could stay overnight, and a small plane could land on that. And Fred Harries did an awful lot of work with a small bulldozer. In fact, they did land a plane on the island, on that strip, landing strip. From the Rocky Point way at the end, east end, that was cleared and graded, but they could never get a license for it as a landing strip because of being so narrow, and maybe the crosswinds because they couldn't land into the prevailing wind. They had to land cross a prevailing wind. So it just never went over. But Fred Harries did land one plane there at one time. And of course, he was kind of a daredevil too. He was flying, I forget what type of aircraft, and he'd go out and he'd buzz the trollers, come down, zoom, and it would scare the pants off you, because if he didn't pull up right, you'd have had it. And I was kind of cussing him, and then he came into Ashland, and he misjudged his landing and ruined his plane over in the Ashland Bay after he buzzed mine.
And Laurie and Grace had that place on Rocky for 28 years, where she served
Yeah.
the noon meal and took orders from the boat on a ship-to-shore radio. And we did that for 28 years.
Laurie was skipping the excursion boat, the Chippewa at that time. For years he ran that for...
Yeah, I remember riding out there once.
That was like a sightseeing boat?
yeah.
That was quite an arrangement because they would tell Laurie, the people on the excursion boat would tell Laurie give him their order, and by the time they'd get out to the island, he had phoned it in and Grace would have it ready, so she could serve 100 people in less than an hour.
Yeah, they could have either boiled or fried fish. And then she had the homemade pie and
Lemon pie
biscuits.
was her
lemon pie,
trademark.
And it was
homemade
good.
rolls and all
Yeah.
that. And they had a few cabins. In fact, they still have a cabin out there. We're going to have it a certain number of years.
Lyman, you might tell of a couple of the interesting things when you were trolling out there the time the plane came down and
Another small plane from down, I think Medford area, would come up and they had pontoons and they would troll from the plane. Just to stand on the pontoons and troll.
Oh, for God's sakes.
And one day the northeast was kicking up, and I said to the party, I said, "Is that crazy guy. He's got to get out of there, or he's gonna flip, because the waves were getting pretty steep. Hadn't any more than got it out of my mouth, and saw the tail go right up and over on its back. So we pulled up the lines. In fact, I had to switch from the little offset trolling motor to the main shaft and start the big engine. That was when I had that 450 horse in it. By the time I got out there, Dale Vorse was there also with the interlude, Harvey's boat, what he does now. And there was a woman screaming, there's a man still down there. There's a man still in the cabin. And you back in and you look down, and this cabin is about 6 feet underwater, you know. It's giving you an awful eerie feeling. So one of the fellows in the boat says, tie a line on me and I'll go down. And I was trying to hold, and then Dale Vorse came back. He'd been talking to somebody up in forward, and he came back and he said, no, he says, we got all of them out. But for a few minutes I could envision pulling the corpse up, you know, because it had been quite 15 minutes since he had flipped. But then Dale took the people, and they asked me if I would tow the plane in to where it was secure in between Rocky and South Twin. And what can you do? You almost say you have to. You try to tow a plane that's submerged like that. I wasn't making trolling speed. And of course we had been catching fish like crazy, and the party was grumbling, and I told them, well, it's one of these things that you can't avoid. So it took the rest of the day to tow in from north of Brownstone, east of Brownstone, into the shallow there, where we left the plane.
And they salvaged the plane?
Yeah. They had to bring, whether it was the outer island or the plus wood out, and they put with their crane, they put a cable around it and lifted it up. I imagine it was all, you know, they could re-salvage the engine and everything. It'd be just water.
Yeah, when you were in grade school and stuff, you went into Bayfield?
Yeah.
Did you ever go sliding down Cooper Hill and stuff, all the rest of it in Washington?
Not too much there, because we had the ski hill, which is now Stenspath Road, the ski hill road. That was our sliding hill. And there were other kids. There was the Sykes kids, there was the Swifts, there was the Wilcoxes, who else around Bayfield, or out there? The Ripples. He was the superintendent of the hatchery. So we always had a gang that, you know, we played together.
Weren't you the one who took Ted Oakstrom or somebody up to show him the
Yes.
ski hill?
I pretty near lost my two brothers there.
You did it.
I
them
was
the
a
ski hill.
traitor to the family.
They
I
loved
took
that hill.
Ted Oakstrom up on the ridge and showed him where they could have it would be a good ski hill, which was now Ashwa Bay. And my brothers were mad at me. You know, that's private territory back there.
And that reminds me of what my daughter said when
It's sacred.
they started in Port Superior. And Harvey was the one that took people out there, and he said, now this would be a good place for a marina. And then when they built the marina, my children were furious. They said, it's our bay. They went swimming in it, you know. And they said, now he's ruined our bay. But that's the way things go.
Well, I was taken to task when we declared we were going to go up to Minnesota. Both of my brothers took me aside and said that I was betraying the family. I belonged in Bayfield. This is where I was born. This is where I should stay.
Really?
You know? And I said, well, we think the kids need a better education than what they can get in Bayfield. And of course the range was wonderful for educational opportunities, you know. The schools were the very best. If you've have never seen like the high school at Hibbing, it is
I've seen that high school.
Beautiful
Yes.
place.
Amazing, yeah.
one of the best in the country, you know. So they got a good education up there.
But you came back.
And I betrayed the family only for those 18 years.
Yeah.
Well, David wanted to stay. David wanted to stay right there, and when he was in the Navy, of course, he was gone for 3 years, but aside from that, he wanted to stay there, and that's why he did this and that and made syrup for, well, I think in all, he was, Lyman was in it, a lot of the syruping too, when we made maple syrup up there. And, but David put in 50 years, 54 years, minus 3 years he was in the Navy making maple syrup up there. And it was very hard work, and everything comes at once, and you have to gather sap when it's running. And it's very intense work, but both Harvey and David, though they worked very hard, enjoyed that. And
What time of the year was it?
well, that's the last week in March. The general date for that would be the last week in March, and the 2 first weeks in April is the usual season. They used to go up in the middle of March to tap the trees, and sometimes the snow was hip deep at the time. But you had to tap. You can't tap them early, and if you tap them late, you lose the first run of sap. And Lyman, of course, knows all about that because he was in it at it from the beginning and built the fireplace in the second cabin that they had. And the second cabin is still there, though David added a room to it fairly lately.
Okay, we gotta change the tape.
Superior.
Boats isn't around here.
No.
Okay, now what's your one last story you were gonna say?
During the war, for a couple of years, I was Standard Oil agent, bulk station agent. And in delivering gas out in the Sioux River area, there were 2 brothers that had a little box factory. And they were arguing, when I came to deliver gas to them, they were arguing who's doing the most work. So I said, well, if you guys can't get along doing this, why don't you sell that thing to me? Well, all right, what did he give us for it? So I bought it. I bought the box factory and I moved it into town, set it up down there, right about where the trailers are next to Hulver's. And at that time they were dismantling a railroad loading ramp. They used to drive up with the trucks, and I got a bunch of timbers from that, and I built a building, put all the machinery in it, and I made fish boxes and apple boxes and so forth until, again, the fishing went haywire with the lamprey and so forth. And that was one of the, I used to go out and buy popple and basswood bolts, you know. That little saw would take a 48-inch, would be the longest. But could you saw stuff with that? That was fun.
Fish boxes too,
Yeah,
did you?
made fish boxes.
And you remember what David said to you about that one time? They used to kid each other about everything, David and Harvey, and Harvey too, and Lyman. And so one time, David said, I think I got the last word today, because I was talking, to Lyman about it. And he has made a remark to David, I don't know what that was, but David said to him, well, you're making coffins for dead fish. And Lyman couldn't think of a comeback.
Anyway, that was an awful lot of fun. Just stand down there and run that saw myself, and I had about 3 people that worked steady. And it was, had the box business continued, I would have stayed with it because that was a lot of fun.
You like to work with your hands.
Oh yeah, love it.
He does
Love-
very nice furniture.
Is that right? You still do the woodworking now?
Beautiful, beautiful. And his
You have a shop up at your place?
In the basement, I made a china closet and bookcase and this last winter a gate leg table.
cabinet maker.
It's fun. It's got to be out of cherry though. I love to work with cherry.
He'll build it, get it all ready, but then he wants no part of the finishing. Then
Now,
that's
who
where I
does
come-
that?
Mickey does miniature furniture. She does beautiful miniature furniture. Mickey
Is that
does.
right?
She doesn't talk.
I haven't done it the last couple of years. but
Beautiful, beautiful.
I have a little tiny lathe and
Oh, what fun.
Yeah.
do all the fun
Oh,
things
yeah.
In
with it.
fact, I used her lathe. I made a set of chess pieces a year ago, and I used her lathe because the big lathe is just, too small for it. That's a lot of fun, diddling with that.
I think so.
So even though you're retired, you don't let the grass grow under your feet?
No.
What's your favorite trolling fishing story? You got one? Or who are the weirdest people you ever took out trolling?
Right offhand,
You might
I
tell
can't think of anything that'd be just outstanding.
You might tell about Werner's relative.
Yeah. There's a doctor up at, he was a company doctor up at Hoyt Lakes, and his wife's parents came up there one time, and we met after church, and she said, says, your name is familiar. Did you ever live in Bayfield? Yes. Did you ever take parties out fishing? Yes. Now do you remember me? Then it came back. This was on the first boat, the commotion. We were out fishing off of Cat Island, trolling deep, and this lady hooked something. And I went back and I could move it, by standing on the back deck. And I turned over and I says, I think you've hooked a corpse. She just went blanche, because after all, when a body is lost in Lake Superior, they very seldom recover.
Right.
And this was being facetious. But as I began to pull it up, and I'd gain a little bit, I didn't want to break the line, I didn't want to break it off, I wanted to see. When I got so I could look down and see, it was an old Ford automobile cushion.
Oh,
Just as heavy perhaps as a corpse would be, but I had her scared for a while. And of course she remembered that.
oh yeah, I bet you did.
So I think that satisfies it. That's the weirdest one. Yeah.
Oh, God. I love it. We gotta go look at Holly's weaving.
Yeah.
So,
Let's stop now, and I want to get some shots.
It's fun.
Well, Holly, explain what you're doing here now in this loom.
Well, this is the shuttle, and I wind rag on this. We call ourselves a rag pickers, a group of women at Presbyterian Church. Help me and cut the strips and sew them together in the proper manner. Then I weave them. And so I'm going to, this is the shuttle, and this is the breast beam, and he's standing at the back beam, and I put 75 yards of warp on that. This is the warp this way. And then whatever you put through this way is, all weaving is done by lifting some of the threads. There are many threads in front of you, and some looms work by lowering some threads, and some looms work by raising them. This one works by raising some of the threads of the warp. Now I'm going to and this is the beater, fairly heavy, and I am pressing with my foot down on a certain one of the treadles underneath the loom to bring up a different set of threads, which is going to make a pattern. Now, when you have raised some threads and you lay a thread through them, all the weaving in the world is done in the same way. You're laying a piece across it, and because some threads are raised, when they're lowered again, weaving has taken place. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
The pattern is determined by where the, now I've raised a different set of them, so
So what is it you're weaving?
I'm weaving a rug. This is going to be 31 inches wide, and it can be any length. I made a 15-foot rug for a lady last year, so that's nothing difficult about that. Be careful or I'll hit that. Did I hit it? It's fun to do this, and it's quite good exercise, as you notice.
Now, what started you weaving?
Well, when I got my eye disease, I had been teaching, and that's the thing I love doing. I taught 28 years. Teenagers are my favorite age. Teenagers, I love them. And I feel very relaxed and at home in front of a room full of teenagers. That's why I taught school so many years. It was because I wanted to. And they're the best days of all. They're very open about themselves, and they haven't developed the subterfuges of adults so that they're the way they are. They haven't gelled any of their faults.
How many rugs do you think you made?
Oh, I started to weave when I retired. I was taught to weave by the rehabilitation. Wisconsin, do a good job. And let's see, I keep track of it. I could count them, but I've made probably about 350 or 400 rugs now. I don't weave all the time. I make special orders. I weave some of them it's fun anyway. I enjoy doing it. If I have trouble with any of the bolts, once in a while I'll hear a bolt fall out, and if I can't find it myself, I call Lyman, and he comes up and helps me fix it. But when you like to weave, you like to do all of it. You like to fix it, and you like to mend a broken thread. It's fun because you're making something that otherwise would be in the dump. It would be nothing, but you've made a rug. So that is really fun to do. And the fact that my vision is poor doesn't make any difference at all, because I'm so used to doing it.
So you can feel.
And I know what
is.
to do at the edge. Kind of a nice rug, isn't it?
Yeah.
All kinds of material.
And the pattern is a random pattern that appears by the...
The pattern is determined by where the thread goes. See, there's one rack of threads. These are called heddles, and the thread, it goes through only one of them, of course. There's a different set of heddles. This is, that's called tabby. That's every other thread is up now. And then you press the next one, that's the others that didn't come up before. That's plain weaving. But I have a pattern on mine so that I have them on these racks here. 2, 3, and 4. And I step on them in a certain way, which creates the pattern. 2, 3, 4, or there could be a combination, and then the plain weaving on that way and that way. It's easy to step on them, like as an organist does when you use the pedal. And then there are many looms that are made electric, so that if I couldn't do this with my legs, I could have this done electrically. And weaving is a very, very complex thing. I would say I was about in the 1st or 2nd grade of weaving, because it's a highly complex thing. And the country where they do the most sophisticated weaving and make the best looms for the money is Finland. And there's a great deal of weaving done there. For example, you can get a job just designing weaving. One of the Mackie women, the one who paints the sailboats so well, has a cousin in Finland who just designs weaving. That's her job. And it's a very interesting hobby, because you can either buy yarns and weave them, or you can weave cloth, cut it up and sew something out of it. I have a relative who does that. For example, you can make some beautiful herringbone wool suiting, and then you can weave a little piece of cloth, cut it up and make a suit out of it. Or you can do things like rugs out of material that otherwise would be thrown away. And then in the small room,
Hence the name, rag rugs. Huh?
yes, these are just rag rugs. And this is the truth. It's hard to believe, but out in San Francisco, there's a very prodigious furniture and house things store. And for a handmade rag rug, they charge $159. One rug.
And you charge?
Mine you can buy for about $12, $14, $15, one about a yard and a half long. It's the average long. The average length of a rug, because they're the kind of rugs that you want to wash in the machine when you've used them a while. You know, at the bottom of the basement stairs, or in your living room, or in the front step, or the back step, or the porch of the house, or out of the cabin. So that's
Well, show us these finished rugs back here.
Yes, I will do that. And here, I can measure so that I can see what length they are. They're very good. And then these are some of the finished rugs. This is made of all lavenders and purples.
That's a beauty.
I think it is nice. And I think this is a green one, dark green. Blue is a favorite color. We make a lot of blue rugs because so many people like them. And this is a blue one. I have red one too. I think this is another blue one, isn't it? Yes. And here I think is a red one. Very nice for a country atmosphere in a home. Another one. And I have a few more in the other room. That's the way they look when you're done.